Hello and welcome back to Explain It Slowly in another solo episode, mainly because something came up in life recently. Those of you who follow me on Instagram might know that there was a death in the family recently, and it's taken priority over a lot of things. Family has had to have taken a bit of priority, and those things definitely get in the way of scheduling interviews and things like that. But given when this will go out to the public, I figured this would be a good time to talk about civics and participation. Now, if you do not support Explain It Slowly on Patreon, I recommend you do. You get episodes the week that they come out, the time that I record them. They're much more recent, so if you're not there, then head over there. It's about the price of a cup of coffee a month, and hopefully you'll be getting some great content there. I try to make it worth your while. Anyway, let's talk about civics and participation, which is a pretty active conversation right now, considering we're talking about politics a lot. It is the election season, and I myself have been reading up on a lot of what my local politicians are doing and saying, as well as policy regarding things that are much more local to me, in particular New York City, and of course I am paying attention to the election and what the two candidates stand for and what are their policies on certain things. And I wanted to do this because I have a certain opinion or feelings on these things that I feel like I don't really get out, and as the idea of saying these things is, a bit of a thing you don't say, right? But I do believe that, a good society has people who are engaged in civics and are engaged in politics and understand those things and are able to communicate on a level of efficiency with it, that they're able to hold a conversation and understand. Though, from my personal experience, most people vote based on the name of the person or, just off of whose personality they like better. And that's really where it tends to draw the line for me. I don't want to tell people to vote if they don't know anything about the people who are running. It's almost doing the system disservice, in my, opinion, to have somebody go in and vote and not know what it is they're voting for or not know who it is they're signing off for. And the reason for this is that a lot of people don't pay attention to their local politics, the things that really do matter day by day. And, I've been lucky enough to be able to meet a lot of local politicians and be able to see what they do and ask them what they do support and those things. And that helps make a decision, but not everybody's going to get that. So you need to go out and get that information. If you have something you're worried about in your community or worried about in general, it's those steps, those things that will make the difference, right? It might be one grain of sand in a giant, bucket. But if you keep adding in a drop at a time, a single grain of sand, eventually those grains of sand will overflow the bucket. It's very important to do your research on your local politicians, because those are the ones that are going to affect a lot of those social policies that a lot of people care about. And, like, say, lunch for underprivileged peoples or, food and shelter to the homeless, things like that. A lot of that is determined in local budgets rather than national, right? But this isn't to say ignore national politics. What I'm saying is that it's so much more nuanced, and I'd much rather say to tell people to get educated on politics than to tell them to vote, because there's a lot of dumb people that don't understand what's going on that have very strong opinions. And I think anybody on any side of the political fence can agree that strong people with dumb opinions make for bad people to be voting. I really don't see how that could be that much of a contentious issue. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about modern politics. I was curious what the ancient Greeks did with their version of democracy. As you may know, Greece is kind of the progenitor of democracy. The Greek city-states are where these ideas originated in some respects. And we pull a lot of our government from their government, right? I mean, look at our statues in America or any Western civilization that votes in elections, that votes for the people in power. Those places really can pull their roots from this place, right? We can look back in time, see what the problems of their day were, and looking at those, maybe it could just make us a little bit more knowledgeable on the topics of politics. And did they suffer with the same crazy nonsense that we deal with today? What is the similarities between then and now? So let's talk about it. So we talk about Greek city-states and we're talking about democracy. This is really interesting because I think a lot of people associate it with just the Athenians. But when we look at the historical records, there are other Greek city-states that do have forms of democracy, though Athens was considered the place of democracy, right? And it was considered the most complex. But this isn't to say it was the only city-state that had democracy, that had people elected into power. But it was really ingrained into Athenian culture to want to be involved in politics. So the Greek historian Thucydides actually has a great quote that I honestly, in a way, it has been quoted quite a many times by modern peoples. But here is Thucydides' quote, and I might be butchering his name, and I might be on point, but, we'll find out. But he said, "We alone consider a citizen who does not partake in politics not only one who minds his own business, but useless." It was almost ingrained in Athenian culture to be involved in politics. And who were the people that were involved in politics? Well, you had to be 18 years or older, right? If you're 18 years older, you could speak in, Athenian politics. Basically, what happens is that everybody who can be involved in government gathers, and any citizen can speak, and votes are chosen by the majority by a show of hands. It's simple, but it works, and considering the number of people in Athens is significantly smaller than the amount of people in the United States, this really makes sense, right? Basically, it involved male citizens only, right? Women, slaves, foreign residents, these people weren't allowed to have, a say in it, right? And if you wanted to be in a position of power in the government, you had to be 30 years or older. What makes this such an interesting thing, though, is how the problems are, pretty much the same. And you might be wondering, well, we assume that the Athenians had this great system, right? We basically have it in our cultural identity, right? That this is the way it works, and it works perfectly, right? Based on what you'd probably read in a high school textbook. But there are a lot of detractors, and the problems that existed in Athenian democracy and Athenian government are the exact same problems that literally exist today. So, for example, speech was pretty much dominated by those who held a lot of money and influence, people who were just good at speaking. If you knew how to give a great speech and rouse the populace, the people sitting in there, then you could get them to vote for whatever you wanted because you were just that good, The term demagogue actually comes from the kind of idea of a leader there controlling what people say and think. And just like modern politics, the rich and wealthy got together and basically tried to undermine the political process of democracy by getting their ideas and wishes passed inside government. This is a thing that happens now, and we have tons of evidence for both sides doing that now. We have things like super PACs and political action committees that basically give a lot of money to a candidate to get them to support a certain cause, right? And you'd get these groups that are meeting behind closed doors to determine what happens to all people, all Athenians. In the article I'm actually looking towards and quoting in this, they actually quote Thucydides and all of them and how they were critics of democracy because of these demagogues that were, just controlling the masses via how they spoke, right? And they go on to say that these people would get carried away by their emotions or lack of necessary knowledge to make informed decisions. And it was based on this that people like Thucydides became kind of critics of democracy, saying how there are issues associated with it. The article in question actually references some Athenian generals who had won a war but were executed anyway because the people weren't very well informed. Another one is considered to be, like a bad decision that was made by the democratic, vote government of Athens was the execution of Socrates. What I really find interesting about this article, and I'll have it linked below where I can link articles, what I find really interesting about this is that these are the exact problems we have now. And what it shows me is that they're really problems that are indicative to this form of government. And we've seen them, right? Now, I'm not saying replace it. I'm just saying that these are the problems that existed and that the ancient Greeks were also aware of this problem that existed in Athenian government. They understood that this was an issue and that the idea of the populace, the people being involved in government, meant that they also had to be knowledgeable of the subjects, to be knowledgeable of foreign affairs and be knowledgeable of the things going on everywhere outside of it, because those things could determine, the life and death of the city. And at that time, if we're casting vote on whether or not we go to war, which is not something Americans really have a say in, but Greeks did have a say in it, because we're talking about will Athens go to war with Persians or Sparta and all those things, right? Them saying no or yes could very well lead to either them, genociding an entire nation state, or it could lead to them being killed themselves, where the Spartans end up on the shores of Athens and wipe out all the Athenians. That is a very real possibility. So if you're going to be voting and you're going to be a person involved in this process in Athens, you had to be someone who was knowledgeable. You had to make this a part of your life and learn and figure out what's going on and what people believe and what side they're on and what are their points and what are really truly their points, all these different things, these different aspects that really are seen as almost political minutiae today, mattered even more to the Athenians at their time because, while it might not mean a lot to us today, whether or not the tax rate goes up or down 2%, right? Or we might not even have a concept of how that works. And to be honest, it's gotten so complex, I doubt that many people outside of an accountant would know how much this really matters or doesn't matter. But the point of the matter here is that these people needed to be educated, because uneducated decisions or decisions that are made by listening to someone who was a demagogue would lead to real death, immediate death, and is evidence of that. And it's hard for us to see that today when we elect someone to office. We don't necessarily know or aren't privy to things that they're doing overseas. We don't know what those drone strikes are doing in the Middle East. We don't know who they're attacking. There might be information here or there, but it is not the immediate understanding of consequence from, electing a certain government official to office, right? We don't know those things. And it's not a one side or the other side for the political spectrum. It's either side, right? You don't know, and that's why you need to be educated on those things. So I really try not to tell people to go and vote. That is why. That's my argument for that, I guess, that we need people who are educated in these things to vote. And it's why I try to read up on what politicians are doing, especially so, this upcoming election season, there are seats on the Senate for New York that are up, and I need to read up on the people who are running for that. I see the signs everywhere. I see the people who are running, but do I really know what they stand for? Do I really know? I never. I don't think. Did I vote the governor in? Was I allowed to vote then? I don't know. I can't remember. But the point is that I need to find out who these people are, if I'm going to vote for them or not vote for them. I need to know what they believe in, what they stand for. Are these things that I agree with personally? Are these things that I think are important personally? Are they things that I think matter to the overall of society or not? What are the things I prioritize? These are things that I think people, in a way, kind of decide, but they don't take the time to sit down and think about these things in a long term. They don't take the time to figure them out, or they don't take the time at all and they just have an opinion, and they're very sure about it, but they're not very educated on it, and that's a problem. So if you haven't voted yet, I'd recommend that, when the day comes, to go vote, but I want you to read up on who these people are and figure out what they believe in and what are they going to do and what are they going to do for you. Are they going to follow through with it? What is their track record of following through with those things? These are things that are considered political minutiae for nerds, but these are the things that actually matter. It might not be the most engaging politician you'll vote for, but they are supporting a cause that you find to be absolutely important, so you prioritize them over somebody else. These are things that I don't think get recognized in politics, as they've become a bit of a spectator sport. So, again, without further ado, go out, vote, but before you vote, before you cross off that name, before you hit that little check mark or do whatever it is, I've seen some older election ballot boxes have a bunch of bars in it that you press down. When you go out, find out what it is that these people do. Do those things. Those are important things. They are more important, honestly. I think these things have gotten so lost in time that, we kind of get lost in the absolute spectacle that is the elections, that we don't really know what they stand for. And I've had conversations with people my age that don't know what they stand for and are trying to figure out what to vote. There's people who have made up their mind, but I imagine there's a lot more Americans who are very quiet who haven't made up their mind. And if you're not an American, you're in a different country, the same goes for your elections and the people you elect into office in your own country. However your system works, you want to find out what they do and what they believe in, and you want to know how it's going to impact you, or if it'll impact you at all, or if it's something that you're willing to support because you believe in the cause. These are things that I just find to be very important, and I worry that they've gotten lost in the weird need to just be a political activist. It's important to be an educated political activist. Those things are very much needed. So, hey, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's not, but without further ado, be safe, be wise, be well. I'm FPS Diesel, signing off.